I'm not in the service anymore, so he gave me this hat that says retired. But y'all will excuse me while I take a drink, right?
What kind of root beer?
It's root beer.
It's a dirty
Good root beer. It's IBC root beer. Best that Brookshire's has. All right, we are getting started. I have 30 minutes, and it won't take me nearly as long, but I've got 30 slides. See this retired cap? Retired. That means that is not the U.S. government position. I got cleared by them, but these are my opinions. I am Doug Shryock. I'm a lieutenant colonel, retired from the Air Force. Bob, do I have this on? You need to know who I am if I'm going to talk about something like Syria. I am a career intelligence officer. I spent 26, too many years looking at our nation's strategic requirements. I'm also a targeteer. Targeteers put the X on something that disappears the next day. We measure how thick the concrete is on a runway so we know how big the bomb is that's supposed to go through it. We have studied these things. I am a former commander of the National Intelligence Center in Sarajevo. At the time, David Petraeus was my boss. He is a good man. He tripped, he made a mistake, but he's a good man. I worked for the Joint Chiefs of Staff up at the Pentagon as their Chief of Global Targeting. I'm a senior intelligence advisor today over at Global Strike Command. Remember, these are my opinions. These do not belong to the Air Force. They do not belong to Global Strike Command. Don't yell at them, yell at me. When I'm not doing that, what I'd much rather be doing is I'm an organizational psychologist helping small businesses do their job better, keep their people longer, make them healthier. And if I could get rid of everything else, that's what I would do, because it is small businesses, it is the private sector that drives our country. Okay, let's get started. Actually, this is the only slide I need. I love maps. This is cool. This tells me everything about Syria, everything about the Middle East. Oh, by the way, Mali is right here. The French are in there, and we're putting more money into it. Maps. If you get maps, you're on top of it. But maps are not important unless you understand relationships. If you've ever driven from New York down to, what's that, Monticello, roughly, or from Pittsburgh to Richmond, you've crossed the entire length and breadth of Syria. If you've ever driven from Tyler down to San Antonio, you've driven further than Israel is long. It's important for us to understand distances and relationships. All right, wait a minute. We don't need any breaks. We don't need any leaks. Intelligence is very important, isn't it? We've got to keep it classified. We cannot let the average person on the street know about it. We looked at this before. I was up here before. I know, you told me, yeah, so what? That's exactly it. So what? Look at what WikiLeaks gave us. The Middle East nations are concerned about Iran's nuke problem. Really? You think so? If your neighbor is saying, I'm getting a Gatling gun, you're going to be concerned. You should be concerned. This is intelligence? Wait, this is important? China likes business more than they needed divided Korea. If you don't get that, Tim Kaine, Ashton Orovitz, you haven't been doing your jobs. Even China works on a capitalist economy. They own us. The Obama administration bribed other nations to take Gitmo detainees. Okay, maybe we didn't know that, but does it make sense? Look, Canada, Yeah, we took these terrorists on the battlefield, and they're pretty bad people. They knocked down our buildings and killed 2,000 of our people, and they don't want to go home, and their home country doesn't want them. Would you take them? How can I sweeten the pot a little bit? That's not intelligence, that's common sense. I'd do it again. If we could get rid of every terrorist and they went to Siberia with no chance of ever coming home, I'd pay Russia. In fact, I think Gitmo is a mistake because it's warm. Terrorists love to be warm. They come from the Middle East. It's warm there. If there is Shimmy, Alaska. Okay. The Afghan Vice President Massoud reportedly took $52 million in cash from the UAE. Not everybody does things the way we do it. The rest of the world doesn't act quite like the United States. Now, I do seem to remember a certain congressman in Louisiana who kept cash in his freezer, so maybe they aren't that different from us. It's no big deal. The U.S. may be working to remove uranium from Pakistan. I sure hope so. Talk about a third world country with nukes. That's scary. If they're not doing it, they're doing something. If the U.S. isn't working that way, they're doing something wrong. Secretary of State Clinton, former secretary now, directed diplomats to gather information on counterparts. Ladies and gentlemen, the State Department has an intelligence division. What are they going to do if they don't collect information? Honestly, every business that sends an executive abroad or to another state or to another city ought to debrief them when they get home. It's what we do. It's how we get a corporate advantage. It's how we gain information. I don't know. State Department called Qatar the worst in terrorism. Well, every list has to have somebody at the bottom. Number 3, who gets a medal at the Olympics, is not as good as number 1. But he's still on the medal stand. He's still involved in it. Somebody has to be at the bottom. Somebody's going to be at the bottom here. Maybe they'll be the least important part of it. Russian and Italian leaders are friends. Vladimir Putin is wrestling bears with his shirt off. Do you really want to be friends with him? And oh, by the way, the Italian leaders who are marrying their escorts, Putin can be friends with them. I don't care. Hezbollah continues to receive weapons from Syria. If you didn't know that, you have not opened the Tyler Morning Telegraph in about 10 years. It's not news. It's not intelligence. But this is very important. The State Department leaders have low opinions of foreign leaders. Okay, I have a low opinion of Vladimir Putin. Alpha dog. That's bad. That's terrible. Every politician is an alpha dog. If they aren't, they probably wouldn't be in politics. Probably the same reason they're paranoid. I don't understand the risk avoidance. I don't know how you be a leader or a politician without being willing to take a risk. Rarely creative. Many politicians I've known. Voluptuous blonde Ukrainian nurse. Now, that's stated information. That was Gaddafi's very important medical professional who was working with him. All right, exactly. Let's look at something important. Weapons of mass destruction. WikiLeaks says, and this came from, I just quoted here, I could get it from any one of several sources. U.S. troops in Iraq continue to find chemical weapons labs. That's interesting. Jihadists, insurgents, and foreign Iranian agitators recovered some of those stockpiles. Well, it's not really intelligence because they told us that. The Iranians have been telling us all along that they got these things, and they're very proud of it. American forces purchased liquid sulfur mustard blister agent. That actually came out in the news too, so Julian Assange didn't do us anything, but it happened. Where am I? Bob? Can you give me another one? All right. 155 millimeter artillery shells were discovered under a community watch checkpoint. Read the news. This isn't intelligence. It happened. And oh, by the way, they put them in a Volkswagen van. We had one when I was a kid. It was a rattle trap. It was probably a death trap before they put stuff like that in there. It's a shell game. They're moving it around. As late as 2008, WMDs were still being unearthed. These may be interesting facts. Wait a minute, no. If you say Bush was right, then CNN's going to be against you. And the media is going to be against you. And nobody's going to believe you anymore, so Bush couldn't be right. All of those things must have... But we believe WikiLeaks. But WikiLeaks is supporting Bush, so there's a disconnect there. Never mind, we'll just go on. Let's figure out what's important. What is a WMD? According to the World English Dictionary and CARTA, weapon causing overwhelming loss of life. A weapon usually biological or chemical that causes overwhelming devastation and loss of life. Pretty straightforward. Wikipedia, who I trust a lot more than something like the English Dictionary, a weapon of mass destruction that can kill, bringing significant harm to large numbers of humans or great damage to man-made structures, natural structures, or the biosphere. Chemical, biological, nuclear. Overwhelming loss of life. It says usually. Okay, which one of these is a WMD?
All three.
Okay, all three of them are. How about number 4? Chinese pumped poison gas into cities in, what's that, 400 BC? Is that a WMD? How about when they were catapulting plague-infected bodies into cities? I know. How about in colonial America? Reportedly, the British were distributing smallpox-laced blankets to the Indians. WMD? How about Timothy McVeigh? Fertilizer is a WMD? Yeah. All right. There are no new ideas. I know you're going to agree, but there are a lot of new applications. There are a lot of new ways and a lot of ways that evil people are going to kill. WMD exists. The fact that Bush said there was WMD in Iraq, you can argue with it, but did it matter what we called it? Did Julian Assange leak classified intelligence or common sense? I'm not going to tell you. You're going to tell me. Because it depends on who you are and what your perspective is. If you're doing intelligence, I love maps. I told you I love maps. You have to look at certain things. That's strategic intelligence, national intelligence. You're dealing with history, people, government, economy, geography, communications, transportation. All of this is important. It'd be classified, wouldn't it? It's got to be classified because it's important. I'm going to give you a source. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you all of this information and you can go to it anywhere. I can also give you the regional maps of the world, flags of the world, a physical map of the world, which is very important, political maps, standard time zones. That's important because Afghanistan is what, so many and a half hours ahead of us? It's very confusing. But you probably won't trust this source. It doesn't have much credibility. It's unclassified. If you Google World Factbook, you will have all of this information and you will make your own educated guesses. That's all Intel is. Educated. All right, going back to maps. I love maps. You don't have to go to the CIA. You don't have to go to Google. Reach under your chairs and pull out the Bible. The maps are right there. This is good, and I'm going to do all kinds of things I'm not supposed to do as a briefer. I'm going to turn my back on you. But look at this. The Silk Road runs right across here. Mesopotamia, Syria. You've got Damascus down here. Aleppo is up in this area. You've even got Nineveh over here. Remember Nineveh? Yes. Nineveh's in northern Iraq. Boy, we had a hard time bombing northern Iraq because Nineveh was there. You can see Lebanon down here. Okay, this is kind of hard, but I love seeing the mountains because the mountains tell you something. The rivers tell you something. Also, when you don't see anything, that tells you something. Damascus is an oasis on the edge of the Syrian desert. We'll get back to that in a minute. But Aleppo is in the Fertile Crescent of Syria. Aleppo is the economic breadbasket of Syria. Why is Damascus the capital? Political. Let's look at a few political distinctions. I told you about Damascus down here. Here's Homs. Aleppo is up north. Lebanon over here. And here's a little state, one of the states of Syria. The Alawites come from there. They'll be important in a minute. But again, look at all of this area that has almost nothing in it. That's what Damascus controls. That is, in fact, the state of Damascus reaches across into. Look at Dara. Look at the Golan Heights. Dara is where the Arab Spring started in Syria. All of these are important. Oh, did you notice that Israel is right here? Yeah. Turkey up above. Okay. All of this is important. You can get all of this out of the map. But let's look at the words. Syria, just one slide on Syria. They were under the French control until 1948. That's not quite true because Syria's been around since about 6000 BC. Syria's old, but Syria has been fought over. Syria has been the crossroads of many civilizations. Even the Armenians during the massacre, I'll say it, the massacre by the Turks in the early 1900s, the Armenians fled down into Syria. There are Christians in Syria. There was a huge Jewish population in Syria. In fact, many of the Jewish towns, suburbs, are still empty, waiting for the Jews to come back. Interesting. All right. In 1958, Syria and Egypt united to become the United Arab Republic. It didn't last very long, only until 1961. The problem was that half the people in Syria wanted to join Iraq instead of Syria, or instead of Egypt. There was civil war going on back in the early 60s. Okay. There was no political stability. Basically, military coups, whoever was in power. In 67, the Arab-Israeli war, Syria lost the Golan Heights. You know who the defense minister was? I wouldn't want him to be running my country after he lost the Golan Heights, but he was. He was defense minister. In a bloodless coup, he took, for the Alawi sect, control of the government of Syria. The Alawi sect is Shia, not Sunni. Majority Sunni, kind of like Iran, very much opposed to Iraq, but the Alawis are not even Sunnis, minorities. All right. I won't go through the whole family history, but in 2000, Bashar, the second son of how do you say that? The father, Assad, came to the throne, to the presidency, whatever you want to call it. In 2000, every 7 years they have an election. In 2007, he was reelected by 97% of the voting population. That may not have been a staged election. People were happy. Bashar, what's his background? Anybody know? Ophthalmologist. He was actually a doctor because his father wanted to be a doctor, but instead his father became a dictator for life. Same thing. The Syrian people were ready for some relief. Bashar came to power and started reform movements. Women were given much more power. The minorities, remember he's an Alawite, he's not a Sunni, he's not a Shia. Even the Christians were given more power under Bashar al-Assad. Even the Lebanese who were being occupied by Syria were thrilled when Bashar came to power. Why? Because he promised to leave, and in 2005 he did. He left Lebanon. Lebanon used to be the French Riviera of the Middle East. I mean, in Syria, in the Levant, so many people speak Arabic, English, and French. Trilingual. They are educated, very urbanite people in many respects. They wanted to be part of the 20th century. Granted, it's 2005, 21st century. They were thrilled when Bashar came to power. Syria and Egypt still remain very closely allied. Remember the flag I had up there at the beginning, the 2 stars of the Syrian flag? One of the stars is Syria, the other one is Egypt. They keep that flag today. They are so closely aligned. The Arab Spring, though, down in Dara near the Golan Heights, hit Syria in March of 2011. Bashar wasn't opposed to this. He didn't crack down immediately. He was ready for them to have more freedoms. He's a medical doctor. He wants what's best, and oh, by the way, he was forced into it because his idiot brother had cracked up in a car who had been trained for the presidency from birth and killed himself. Bashar had no intention of becoming a political leader. He knew nothing about politics, and unfortunately it shows now. Syria responded. They gave more freedom. They wanted their people to be a part of the government, and they wanted to get beyond the Sunni, Shia, Alawite, Armenian. They wanted their people involved. They wanted to be more like France than like Egypt, like Qatar, like Saudi Arabia. They wanted their women to be a part of their country. It was important, but you don't always get what you want. There were movements in the Syrian political spectrum, including the Muslim Brotherhood, who pointed at Assad and said, he's the problem. And he has become part of the problem. Part of the problem in response, though, to what's going on in his country. There are demands for him to step down, and he should. He will. The question is how. International pressure includes the Arab League, led by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, Turkey, which was their very close ally, and the United States. We have put a line in the sand, kind of. Russia, China, and Iran do want Syria, do want Assad, do want the Alawite minority, mainly because it becomes a leverage point for them. It gives them a foothold into the Middle East. They don't care what happens inside of Syria as long as they're allowed to be a part of the game. Former Secretary General Kofi Annan tried until last August, and he said it's not any one party. This is a madhouse. This is chaos. This is the north of Syria against the desert of Syria. These are people who are not going to get along regardless of who's in charge. And it shows. Estimates say over 60,000 people have been killed, 2 million internally displaced. Remember, Aleppo is 2.5 million. Anybody who's been to the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, that's only 8 million. So a quarter of the Hampton Roads area has been moved somewhere. And the estimates vary anywhere from 500 to 800,000 have gone to other countries. This happened again. The Palestinians had this problem. They went into other countries where they weren't wanted. Right now, the Syrians are in Turkey, they're in Jordan, they're in Qatar, they're all over the place, and none of those countries want them. They want them to go home. All right, let's go fast. If you're going to look at Syria, you have to look at what happened before Syria. 1990-91, pre-Operation Desert Storm. Iraq is in a hard place. Sorry. But they're surrounded by Turkey, NATO ally, Jordan, that's very Western, Saudi Arabia, that's invited the United States in, and Kuwait, who Iraq happened to invade. That's not good for business. As the United States-led coalition started moving north, Saddam decided he had to get his assets out of there. Where is he going to send his planes so they won't be shot out of the sky or bombed off the runways? Iran. He sent them to Iran. What's wrong with sending them to Iran? For the last 8 years, you've been in a death struggle with Iran. Well, he did it anyway. Funny thing happened on the way to the bank, though. Saddam noticed that his planes were being painted Iranian colors. Those planes aren't coming back. Okay, Iran's off the table. The Americans are coming north. They're coming in. Where am I going to send any more of my material if I've got it? Where in the world could I hide materials outside of Iraq that I could actually get to? Any ideas? No. Really think about it now. Can you think of anywhere you might send WMD if you have it? Yeah, that's an easy question. Well, let's look at it. We got through Desert Storm. Saddam was able to keep his forces somewhat intact. He even had his chemical weapons labs down here. But under OIF, the Americans are coming in again. I'm going to move them back to my hometown near Tikrit, which is here, but Baghdad is right in here. Let's move them north. The Americans keep coming. They're taking Baghdad this time. We'll move them north. There's only one problem with moving your chemical weapons north. Kurdistan is not a country, is it? Kurdistan is the country that isn't. Kurdistan is not part of, well, it is. Kurds, not Kurdistan, but Kurds are not Iraqi. They're not Iranian. They're not Turkish. They're not Syrian. They are an oppressed minority. And oh, by the way, Saddam kind of gassed them with mustard gas. You probably don't want to give them any WMD. All right, so let's just jump the border. Let's go into Syria. This is all supposition. We don't know that this has happened. We don't know. But, look at the maps. Oh, by the way, CNN says, this is December of 2012, CNN says, analysts believe Syria may have one of the largest stockpiles in the world. Supplies include sarin, VX, mustard gas. I just mentioned it, Iraq killed thousands of Kurds by chemical attack in 1988. Desert Storm was less than 4 years later. Holly Ann said this, I did not. Why did anyone doubt Iraq had WMD? Going back to Bush was right? All right, let's, Bob? Thank you. So what? Ancient history, right? Intelligence isn't important just because it's classified. Who cares what WikiLeaks gets? Intelligence is important because it's important. It isn't exclusive to governments. It's not sexy. James Bond is not intelligence. James Bond is Hollywood. It's not all-knowing. It's not able to predict the future. It's an informed observation. It's an informed guess. Intelligence is selected, collected, figure out what we want to know, go get it, analyze it, evaluate it, distribute it, and then act on it. If you are not willing to act on it, I don't care what you know. You're an idiot savant. All right. For us, and I'm trying to go fast, we're into Syria with the possible chemical weapons. For the West, see any of those Autobahns in Germany? Well, they aren't just in Germany. They're all the way through Turkey, and right there is Greece. If you're Russia, you see that it goes up to Armenia, Georgia, and Chechnya. You don't want those chemical weapons outside of Syrian borders. All right, information. Syria's had these weapons, possibly, but the Arab Spring hits. Race riots break out in Egypt. So what? Doesn't matter as long as it's in Egypt. The problem is, opposition groups are taking to the streets. What are we going to do about it? If you're Libya, you say, hey, boss, colonel, I think you ought to be prepared because Mubarak's kind of like you. And they're taking him down. Gaddafi didn't prepare soon enough. I'm kind of glad about that. Israel, Mubarak enforced a peace between Israel and Egypt. The opposition, though, includes Muslim Brotherhood. Israel, be prepared. Iran, Mubarak has been way too friendly with the West. This is our opportunity. The Suez Canal is an economic critical node for the West. We take that out, we are back in business, and we are influence makers. And Syria. Jeez, Egypt is our sister state. Remember those those stars on the flag? Whatever happens there is gonna happen to us. Syria has been in turmoil for 22 months. Civilians have been targeted by both sides. Now I'm giving you my somewhat educated assessment. In a way, so what? Israel has its Iron Dome. Turkey has the Patriot batteries that are going to be effective soon. Those short-range ballistic missiles are going to stay in Turkey. Do we really care?
Did you have something there?
Yes, but not from a military, political, strategic perspective. We do care from a humanitarian perspective. But it's a civil war. Syria has acknowledged its army cannot defeat the rebels. Chaos. If desperate enough, we believe, we being anyone who reads the newspaper, that Syria will move its chemical weapons. Where they will move it is up in the air. President Obama has drawn a red line. What? He said that use of chemical weapons will not be tolerated. But when his U.S. Consul General in Turkey, who is as close as you can possibly get to the site, said they were used on December 23rd, White House said, no, they didn't. Didn't happen. Not going to happen. They will not do it. Because the White House knows better than boots on the ground. It doesn't matter what you know if you're not going to take action. Israel took action. Israel saw that SA-17 surface-to-air missiles were going somewhere from the control of the Syrian government and most likely headed toward Lebanon and toward Hezbollah. And they said that's not going to happen. And they took them out. There was a red line and it was crossed. Iran, in the wake of Israel taking action, backed away from the idea that an attack on Syria is an attack on Iran. They said, you know what we said before? Never mind. It's okay. Just don't do it again. Okay, the opposition, the National Alliance, Al-Katabi, stated that they may be willing to negotiate with the second vice president. Joanne is our second vice president. You want to negotiate with Joanne? Katabi is willing to negotiate with al-Sahara because he doesn't have blood on his hands. The Syrians want peace. The Syrians really do want peace, but they've got to have some way to get out of this quicksand, this quagmire that they're in. Syria is on the edge. The Red Cross called it a civil war. It is a civil war. The question is, when will the government fail? I wouldn't have said they were going to stay through the end of the year. Assad made it into 2013. That's amazing to me. I don't think he'll make it out of 2013 in power. The question is, how will it fail? Will there be a transition government? Will the opposition come together with parts of the Syrian government? I hope to God they do. Because if they don't, chemical weapons are going somewhere. Chemical weapons are going to get out of control unless there is a graceful failure. Graceful failure is a good thing. Israel, they'd love to sit it out, but they won't if they have to involve. They have demonstrated they will act. Iran needs Assad, but they don't really. They've already gotten stuff from Assad. They got 50,000 militiamen in Syria just in case Assad falls. Just like in Iraq, the Iranians are going to be there, and they're going to be well armed, well organized, and there's going to be chaos there for a long time to come. They have plan B. They have a plan C and D and E and on. The Iranians have gotten what they want from Syria. Now it's a question of who's going to take over. Will Iran be on the winning side, or will Iran be in the opposition? Russia couldn't care less, except for pride. Russia is not a superpower. They want to be, they think they are, they're not. But if the U.S. is seen in any way to be victorious, we've got a problem. Because because Russia will take it as a failure for them. They want the Cold War all over again. For the United States, it's a trap. If we act, we're going to put somebody in worse. The Muslim Brotherhood is going to be a part of it. If we don't act, whoever wins, and they're already blaming us for what's going on over there. It's easy to blame the United States. It's our fault for everything. And if we apologize for it, we deserve what we get there too. Governments don't deal, I think this is my last slide. Governments don't deal with this because they like us. Nobody likes America. So what? Who cares? They don't deal with us because they trust us. WikiLeaks is out there. There are always going to be private Mannings. There are going to be people who want to be important. And they're willing to sacrifice our nation to be important for a couple of minutes. Nations don't even try or deal with us because they think we can keep secrets. They know we can't. They know that if it's a secret today, it's going to be in the Tyler Morning Telegraph tomorrow. So what? If you can read a map, you know what's going to happen. They deal with us because it's in their interest. They deal with us because it's better for them to deal with us. Some of them do fear us. And they should. We should be fearful to those who would do evil, to those who would create genocide. But we've been turning our back, looking the other way for a long time. Some of them respect us. I'm not sure I'd put France in that category, but France and the Western countries do respect our achievements. Bob? Sorry, I'm talking too much. Okay, most of them need us. One way or another, Ashton will tell you, Tim will tell you, our economy is the bulwark for the entire world. They need us to survive. Even China needs us to survive. That's why they deal with us. All right, okay, conclusion. The United States needs political leadership, knowing what needs to be known. Not knowing everything, but knowing that we need to go get it. Knowing and gathering an understanding. Being willing to act. Having a backbone. Having a spine. In order to act, leaders need to know what our interests are, what our allies' interests are, and what Iran and other adversaries' red lines really are. The United States needs to be a much better poker player than they are today, than we are today. Grassroots. Why are we here? Why are we talking about it? Our job is to determine what our strategic interests are. Actually, our job is to remind our leaders what those interests are, to recruit candidates who understand those interests and have a spine. As one of my, General Petraeus said, we need leaders with guts. Cast iron guts. The man had a way with words. I love it. We need those candidates at the city, county, and state. We need to put them in office. We need to give them feedback. We need to have subject matter experts who have been there and done that lead the way. Because a lot of times politicians are there for the first time and they don't know. We need to help them. And we need to hold them accountable for the actions. I hope I'm done because I've kept you long. Do we have to have questions? Do we want to have questions?
I have one. Am I on?
There you are.
I have one question,
Oh,
but
no.
you will send out a grassroots alert to let us know this is about to happen, won't you? I remember the drills from school where we got under the desk.
Scotty had a plan of attack. If I told her to go visit her Aunt Edna when I was stationed at Plattsburgh Air Force Base, New York, she was supposed to go up to Montreal or further. We'll talk this through on a recurring basis.
Watch out for the alert, folks.
Absolutely.
Likely outlook with North Korea's precision of nukes and long-range delivery systems and the EMP.
Newt Gingrich was right. EMP is a terrible threat. And with an EMP, you don't have to be very accurate. Remember the City Busters? Remember 1950s, they would launch and we would launch and everybody would die? Well, if North Korea launches a missile that, oh, by the way, they've already demonstrated can hit the Western Hemisphere, but they don't detonate it on the ground, but at altitude, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, New York, okay, the North Koreans wouldn't go there, but the Iranians, you didn't mention that, the Iranians are also doing intermediate and looking toward long range. You detonate at altitude, you can wipe out the electronics of the megaplex on the West Coast or the East Coast, from Richmond to Maine, with a single weapon. Newt was not wrong. Newt didn't sell it very well, but Newt was not wrong. Newt is a very intelligent man. Okay? I've kept you so long, and I'm sorry you're going to be late for your next class.